Hello, bruvs. We're back with popular entertainments through the ages by Samuel McKechnie. And we will get started here in the minuet. The minuet. I really want to read that book too. I want to read all these books, but I can only read so many. I don't want to read A Curious History of Vegetables. Yeah, buddy. This guy's here before I'm even here. Night, night, Bubba. This guy fucking comes on before I even push the button. Surprised your face doesn't just pop up on my camera. Hey, buddy. He's here before I got me. It's time to record, Bob. Tie. He there. He there. Popular entertainment. Through the ages. Alright, bruv. We're set up. Time to open this tingamer-bobber. It's loading. You should stop reading. How many pages to go? I believe it starts right there. Yeah, it's at the farewell. 118 to what? 135? No, 133. So 15 pages or so. Stop that. Farewell. Then followed details of the various items in the program. Grimaldi taking the small part of Hawk, a drunken prisoner, in the romance Sixes or the Fiend. Hello, Leo. He played the part with considerable difficulty, but was greatly encouraged by the reception accorded to him by his many friends in the crowded house. The romance. Whoa. Gotta stop that. His farewell at Sadler's Wells was followed 3 months later by... What? Whoa. Hey, stop fucking talking while I'm talking, buddy. His farewell at Sadler's Wells was followed 3 months later by his final appearance at Covent Garden. Again, to a crowded house, he played clown in one scene of Harlequin Hoax, which formed part of the program. He found it necessary to play the part seated in a chair. He sang hot codlings. Then later, in his own clothes, he advanced to the footlights and delivered the following speech, which had been written for him by warm-hearted Thomas Gentleman. Oh, I've already read this yesterday. All right, I started at the wrong spot. Such were the feelings of the great clown upon his retirement, and Thomas Hood, who penned the words with so deep an insight into the heart of Grimaldi, expressed in a poem the feelings of countless desolate admirers. Several topical allusions are omitted from the following ode, which has the merit of giving us a vivid picture of the clown, as well as an idea of how much he was loved. Joseph, they say thou'st left the stage to toddle down the hill of life and taste the flannelled ease of age. Apart from pantomimic strife, retired, for young would call it so, the world shut out in Pleasant Row. And hast thou really washed at last from each white cheek the red half-moon, and all thy public clownship cast to play the private pantaloon? All youth, all ages yet to be, shall have a heavy miss of thee. Thou didst not preach to make us wise, thou hadst no finger in our schooling, thou didst not lure us to the skies. Thy simple trade was fooling. And yet, heaven knows, we can much better spare a better man. That's Amazing. But Joseph, everybody's Joe, is gone, and grieve I will and must, as Hamlet did for Yorick, so will I for thee, though not yet dust, and talk as he did when he missed the kissing crust that he had kissed. Ah, where is now thy rolling head, thy winking, reeling, drunken eyes, as old Catullus would have said, thy oven mouth that swallowed pies, enormous hunger, monstrous drouth, thy pockets greedy as thy mouth. Ah, where thy ears so often cuffed, thy funny, flapping, filching hands, thy partridge body always stuffed with waifs and strays and contrabands. Thy foot, like Berkeley's foot, for why 'twas often made to wipe an eye. Ah, where thy legs, that witty pair, for great wits jump, and so did they. Lord, how they leaped in lamplight air, capered and bounced and strode away. That years should tame the legs, alack, I've seen spring through an almanac. For who like thee could ever stride some dozen paces to the mile, the motley medley coach provide, or like Joe Frankenstein compile the vegetable man complete, a proper Covent Garden feat? Or, oh, who like thee could ever drink, or eat, swill, swallow, bolt, and choke, nod, weep, and hiccup, sneeze, and wink? Thy very yawn was quite a joke, though Joseph Jr. acts not ill. There's no fool like the old fool still. A good old comic clown by John Leach. He's comic. He looks like a demon. Oh, Joey, what have you done? Hey, he just lopped off his head. No big deal. Oh, I beg your pardon. He just lopped off his head, bruv. It's okay. Scene from The 40 Thieves at Drury Lane, Christmas, 1876. Joseph, farewell, dear funny Joe. We met with mirth, we part in pain. For many a long, long year must go ere fun can see thy like again. For nature does not keep great stores of perfect clowns that are not boors. 3. After the retrial of Grimaldi, several factors brought about the decreased importance of Clown, Harlequin, Pantaloon, Columbine, and the other characters of the Harlequinade portion of the pantomimes. The genius of Grimaldi had brought the part of Clown so much to the forefront that the story of the pursued lovers was of less consequence than the escapades of Clown and his companions. The Harlequinade, like a mantle, had been enlarged to fit Grimaldi, and as he was a giant in stature, when his mantle was worn by others, it trailed on the ground and had to be shortened. Even if talent comparable to his had been available, and Tom Matthews and later Richard Flexmore were excellent clowns, it would not have had the practice that makes perfect. Grimaldi had been able to act in pantomime all the year round, owing to the running of this form of entertainment at Sadler's Wells during the summer months. Do I have the light on? I do. A few years before he retired, however, Sadler's Wells ventured, against the strict letter of its license, to remain open all the year round. Being unchecked, it followed the example of the patent theaters by restricting pantomime to the Christmas season. In 1830, Covent Garden made use of its privilege of utilizing speech in pantomimes and introduced the speaking opening. As had been mentioned, Garrick had put on a speaking harlequinade. On its revival in 1820, the piece had been condemned. For this, among other reasons, by Hazlitt. Covent Garden's speaking opening was in Harlequin Pat and Harlequin Bat, or the Giant's Causeway. Leigh Hunt emphatically condemned the experiment, and at the same time he denounced the use that was made of speech in pieces which did not bear the speaking label at all. at all. A speaking pantomime is a contradiction in terms. It is a little too Irish. It is as much as to say, here, you have all dumb show talking. This, to be sure, is what made Grimaldi's talking so good. It was so rare and seasonable that it only proved the rule by the exception. The clowns of late speak too much to keep on saying at every turn, hello, or don't, or what do you mean? Only makes one think that the piece is partly written and not written well. After Harlequin Pat and Harlequin Bat, however, speaking openings gradually became the rule. They increased in length, as did the pantomime itself, which was still an afterpiece. The characters in them had nothing to do with those in the Harlequinade, and were played by different actors. The Harlequinade was placed at the end. Instead of clown, harlequin, and others being the principal attraction, the main feature of the entertainment was the transformation scene with which the so-called opening terminated. That, said Planche, is the old object of attraction, and all the rest is inexplicable dumb show and noise. About the middle of the century, things were so bad that Albert Smith wrote the following parody on the burial of Sir John Moore. Not a laugh was heard, not a topical joke. As its course to oblivion we hurried, not a paper a word in its favor spoke. On the pantomime going to be buried. We buried it after the boxing night, the folks from the galleries turning, for 'twas plain it would scarcely pay for the light of the stars in the last act burning. No useless playbill put forth a puff, how splendid the public had found it, but it lay like a piece that had been called stuff, with a very wet blanket around it. By visiting the pantomime at different periods in the company of excellent critics, we shall be able to see some of the performances and alterations which took place. Clement Scott described a visit to Drury Lane in 1849. He was 8 years of age at the time, and looked forward to his first pantomime. In less than an hour I should be at Drury Lane, seated in the pit, dazed with the chatter of oranges, apples, ginger beer, bills of the play, monotonously delivered by the women, who were then permitted to drag their heavy baskets through the pit benches, and waiting anxiously for the curtain to be drawn up, and show me the Lady of the Lions, to be followed by Rodwell's pantomime of Harlequin and Good Queen Bess, or Merry England in the olden time. The Lady of Lions pleased the boy, although he had imagined that he was going to see a menagerie and a female lion tamer. Afterwards came the pantomime, in which Queen Bess was played by a man, there being good fun when the Earl of Leicester tried to peep at the mysteries of the Queen's toilet. This was typical of the burlesques which took place of stories. What does that mean? Oh, which took the place of stories. The effects consisted of a frost fair on the Thames, a magic bedroom in which every article of furniture became animated, and a painted diorama of Queen Elizabeth's visit to Ireland. These were typical of the sensational scenery and effects. The Drury Lane pantomime of 1854 was described by Henry Morley. It is particularly interesting to notice the serious attention which he pays to the plot of Jack and Jill, or Harlequin, Queen, King, Mustard, and the 24 blackbirds baked in a pie. E.L. Blanchard, the author, had made the story of consequence, and for some 30 years he continued to write the pantomimes for Drury Lane. Concerning Jack and Jill, Morley said, that remains a pretty dish to set before a king, a judge, or a prime minister. Nobody is dignified or wise enough to make a wry face at it. One is disposed, indeed, to bring to book the author, and on behalf of all children to request that he will show us his authorities for considering the history of the 24 blackbirds as a necessary sequel to the accidents of Jack and Jill. No doubt he is justified by diligent research among the nurseries of England in asserting that Jill was so far wanting in domestic education as to be unable to make a pie, that this was the cause of her misfortune, that the making of a pie was its remedy, and that the pie she made was the well known pie of blackbirds, mentioned in the Song of Sixpence. But we must take all this for granted, for the author has himself taken for granted whatever has pleased him must please us and all spectators of his pantomime. We are busied among visions of good things, jams of all sorts, sauces, spice, pickles, and we are refreshed in a temple of salad. In the pantomime proper, he said, there is a profusion of harlequinade. There are feats of strength by the Italian brothers and others, and the fun attempted is brisk enough. This sentence is very important. It shows that the harlequinade could still be referred to as the pantomime proper, and the feats of strength were significant, as they foreshadowed the conquering of clown and company by music hall comedians. In this pantomime, the martial feelings of the nation were effectively appealed to as at many other theaters. The reason, of course, was the war in the Crimean Peninsula. At the Adelphi Theater, the pantomime was almost exclusively topical. It was entitled Zigzag, or The Adventures of the Danube, and the Pruth in Search of Truth. The rivers were impersonated by actresses. The scenery included views of Constantinople, St. Petersburg, and the Black Sea. In the representation of a naval battle, players danced with ships on their heads. The war atmosphere was also present in Bluebeard at the Princess's Theater, the finest scene being a finale which showed the quarter deck of a man of war before and during a battle. The illusion was heightened by the employment of children to represent the officers and sailors, a device which made the entire scene so large by comparison as to be very realistic. The Haymarket pantomime was Little Bo Peep Who Lost Her Sheep. It was introduced by a burlesque, a neat little story very elegantly staged, with Arcadian shepherd scenery and bursts of fairy splendor. There were few allusions to the war. A transformation scene, which evoked particularly marked applause, was the changing of a ballroom, with couches and chairs, into a coach and horses for the departing guests. The following year, Covent Garden, which had forsaken pantomime for several years, re-entered the field with a great blare of trumpets, and with a piece to which a blare of trumpets was historically appropriate, Ye Belle Alliance, or Harlequin, and the Field of the Cloth of Gold. Is this stopped? Possibly. It was to be the pantomime of the season. Public expectation was keyed to the highest pitch by flamboyant announcements. On the hoardings were posted large bills addressed to tall young women, of whom 200 were required, none under the height of 6 feet 2, for the Covent Garden pantomime. There was to be a great tournament. Wonderful dioramas were to be shown. The dioramas proved to be too small, and bad transparencies. The great tournament was a lump or two of armor upon hobby horses. The 200 tall young women, none under 6 feet 2, had undergone a marvelous but unannounced transformation and appeared as 4 Norman chambermaids who performed some stupid business with warming pans. Drury Lane, whose pantomime, like all others, was to have been reduced to puppet show dimensions by the Covent Garden masterpiece, was unsparing in its attack Upon the puerilities of the much vaunted entertainment, at Covent Garden, the Wizard of the North was presenting a great gun trick. Drury Lane introduced a preliminary burlesque entitled The Great Gun Trick, in which Charles Matthews, as Wizard of the South, South, West by East, made fun of the other conjurings and claptraps. The first wizard, Anderson, replied by posters and written challenges, but these were ineffective, so he staged a farce entitled 20 Minutes with an Impudent Puppy. This brought into the battle between the two largest theaters, the smallest one, and the Strand, produced the farce A Plague on Both Your Houses. The malediction was partly fulfilled, for the management of Covent Garden by the Wizard of the North was terminated in March by a fire which burned the theater to the ground. At the Princess's Theater, a few seasons later, the pantomime was Jack the Giant Killer. Morley wrote of it, "Such a giant as is built up here was surely never before seen on any stage. Mr. Shore animates, it is in vain to guess how, a real giant from which opens its mouth where the mouth should be, bends its knees where the knees should be, walks about not more clumsily than giants ought to walk, handles his great club dexterously, and turns up an enormous pair of boot soles when he dies. The harlequinade," he also said, "has not been neglected, and lasts for an hour and a half." The condition of pantomime in the 70s was graphically described by George Augustus Sala. The modern English pantomime consists of two consecutive but not coherent parts, the opening and the comic business. Properly, one should be the natural sequel of the other, but this idea has long since, however, been carelessly lost sight of or deliberately abandoned. The opening, to serve the purpose of spectacular display, being spun out to inordinate length, while the comic business, owing to the lack of good clowns and pantaloons, is reduced to a minimum of 2 or 3 scenes, generally representing the outside of tradesmen's shops, which are ultimately changed by harlequins, wonder-working bat into farmhouses or kitchens or railway trains, or something else equally trite and uninteresting. In front of these, clown and pantaloon pursue their traditional career of knavery, and there the shopkeepers are tripped up, old ladies are pushed, young girls romped with, babies sat upon, or crammed into pillar letterboxes. There vegetables, lobsters, codfish, plaster cast, and legs of mutton are flung about the stage. There is a general row. The police make their appearance and are duly bonneted and trampled upon, and the scene closes. Modern clowns are, as a rule, Mr. Harry Bellino, he is one of the old school, may be admitted as an exception, desperately dull, and many are mere contortionists or acrobats who have no admissible claim to be called clowns at all, and endeavor to compensate for their normal dreariness by tying up their limbs in abnormal knots or exhibiting dancing dogs or educated pigs. Some of the modern clowns dance nimbly enough, but not one of their number merits to be named in the same breath with the incomparably droll and graceful Flexmore, now also deceased. So conscious are managers of the stupidity of the comic business and the difficulty of finding changes of scene more exciting than the conversion of a day school for young ladies into a pickled salmon and shellfish warehouse, that at the larger theaters it has become a common practice to interpolate in the harlequinade a spectacle, a procession, or ballet on the largest scale, but in which the performers are exclusively children. That portion of the pantomime termed the opening, which was formerly a mere farce, brief, simple, and funny, has now swollen into a lengthy burlesque extravaganza, crammed with bad songs, wretched jokes, and boisterous and vulgar breakdowns. The whole, however, enlivened by well grouped ballets and scenery, costumes, and appointments of extraordinary magnificence. The decline in the popularity of pantomime was so marked by 1880 that the Times reported, save for its two strongholds in Drury Lane and Covent Garden, which still defy the assaults of fashion and the sap of change, pantomime may now be considered as wholly relegated to the suburbs of London. In the same year, Clement Scott wrote an account of the Drury Lane pantomime, which showed that there was no lack of enthusiasm among the petites. The hell is Pittitis and the gallery boys who had been standing since midday. He also described the story, which, it may be said, was one of the last that could be termed well written. For other reasons, which will appear, it was a noteworthy pantomime. It will be noticed that the curtain raiser was absent, this being a welcome innovation made by the new manager, Sir Augustus Harris. The gods were musical and the pit enthusiastic. Little children with their bright faces and sunny curls told us that Christmas had come again, and when Mr. Wallerstein faced front and conducted the national anthem, there went up such a universal cheer that it might have been heard at Charing Cross. Mr. Wallerstein is accustomed to his good friends in the gallery and leads them right well. It is their holiday tonight, and the band is content to play their accompaniment. The whole house turns its back upon the stage and looks toward the gallery, and then begins one of those splendid choruses in unison for which Drury Lane is famous. Every popular air of the period known to the street boy is called into requisition, and literally called into requisition, and active Mr. Wallerstein is not allowed to stop until his arms literally ache with exertion, and so giving a friendly bow to the gallery boys, audience, conductor, and orchestra, face round again, and the curtain uplifts on Mr. E.L. Blanchard's pantomime. Mother Goose and the Enchanted Beauty. Now here are two fairy stories familiar to every well-conducted and discreet child. One is that delightful romance about the baby princess, to whose christening the wicked, malignant fairy was by accident not invited, and who, in revenge, cast a spell upon the luckless infant. The other is the exquisite fairy tale of the Sleeping Beauty in the wood. When that silly old Lord Chamberlain forgot to invite the witch Maligna to the christening, he little thought what confusion he would create at the christening, for the old woman vows vengeance against the child, and declares she shall die before she comes of age, injured by a spindle. A decree goes out in the storybook fashion to banish spindles from the realm, but, dear me, on the very eve of her majority, the princess hocuses her waiting maids with rum in their afternoon tea, and falls a victim to the snares of Maligna in disguise. Characters from the Drury Lane pantomime of Mother Goose. It's like the Tin Man. And characters from the Drury Lane pantomime of Mother Goose. There's the goose. Goose looks like a damn goose. All right. She is injured with a spindle, as fate decreed, but good old Mother Goose declares she shall not die, but sleep for 100 years, and wake as young as ever, kissed by a handsome prince. Away then goes the story on the track of the Sleeping Beauty, and further opportunities are given for sylvan scenery, enchanting glades, and a moving panorama that will, for its ingenuity and charm, be the talk of all London. The prince, of course, is in love with the picture of the princess, and he starts on a chivalrous enterprise to deliver the spellbound maiden. True to the old story, a touch, a kiss, the charm was snapped. The princess is as young as ever, the prince enraptured. But, horror of horrors, the court awakes from its slumbers, not young but hideously old. This all comes of not consulting Mother Goose, who, however, has an instant remedy in her golden eggs that can rejuvenate the assembled court and make them beautiful forever. What an ingenious notion, good Mr. E.L. Blanchard, and what a wonderful pantomime. With its ballet of joys, its mythical ballet describing the flight of 1,000 years, its sylvan groves and pastoral haunts of Arcadian shepherds and shepherdesses, its demon guarded wood and moving panorama, its sleeping court and upheaval of awakening, until that delightful turn when the curtain falls and good little girls and boys can believe that the end is accomplished by the magician wand of the author, and can hear the fair princess saying as they fall asleep, "Oh, seek my father's court with me, for there are greater wonders there, and o'er the hills and far away, beyond the utmost purple rim, beyond the night, across the day, through all the world they followed him." Wonder of wonders, he said, the harlequinade was so good and full of tricks that no one attempted to leave until the curtain finally fell. All these panegyrics seem very promising for the future of old-fashioned pantomime at this time, but Clement Scott made more mistakes than when he denounced the writers who were revolutionizing the legitimate drama. The scenery over which he went into raptures was on the point of ousting the author, and those who are looking for irony may see some in the fact that while he was praising E.L. Blanchard, who was his bosom friend, Clement Scott was helping to bring about his relegation into the background by extolling the scenery. Only the year before, Blanchard had indicated in his diary another element which was altering pantomime. In the evening, go to see part of Jack and the Beanstalk at Covent Garden, a brilliant spectacle, but the music hall element very depressing. Among the actors who earned the praise of Clement Scott in Mother Goose and the Enchanted Beauty were Arthur Roberts and James Fawn, who had been brought into pantomime from the music hall. Their success in this pantomime, particularly that of Roberts, brought about a further decrease of the author's importance. Drury Lane adopted the habit of featuring music hall comedians in its pantomimes, and there took place a wholesale influx that has been called the invasion. The invaders from outside the sphere of the legitimate theater had begun the skirmishing many years before, and was indicated when we mentioned the feats of strength by the Italian Brothers in the 1854 pantomime of Jack and Jill. And there had been tumblers, rope dancers, and others in much earlier pantomimes, but not in sufficient numbers to outbalance a Rich, a Grimaldi, or a Plot. After the success of the Drury Lane pantomime of 1880 and the failure, the same Christmas, of the Lyceum pantomime, from which the music hall element was absent, pantomimes began to depend entirely upon scenery and music hall comedians. Clement Scott, whose glowing praise of Mother Goose and the Enchanted Beauty has been quoted, said that the scenery carefully attaches the modern spirit and lightness, gaiety, and vivacity to the good old-fashioned form of English pantomime. Nevertheless, the good old-fashioned form was being wiped out of existence. Harry Payne, an excellent clown who followed the Grimaldi tradition as much as he was allowed to, wrote a few years later, "You are late. You lose. You lose." In the course of considerably over a quarter of a century of clowning, I have seen some strange changes in pantomime, and changes which, in my humble opinion, have not always been for the better. The gradual disconnection which has come about between the opening and the harlequinade is, I think, to be regretted. And now I hear that at one house this year they are actually going to let down the curtain between the two parts and thus make the severance complete. The harlequinade was dead. It became the custom to let down the curtain between the two, and never say curtain or kitten, the curtain between the two parts of the pantomime, as one might draw curtains as a sign of mourning. Much moaning was heard and is still to be heard, but in spite of the immortal connection, weird that they spell connection that way, between the harlequinade and Joseph Grimaldi, after whom clown is called Joey, most people will agree with Mr. Ivor Brown that Joey gets monotonous and, after short acquaintance, is of use only to ritualists and the highbrows who moan away about a grand philosophy of clownship. Pantomime, as the same writer points out, had successfully reflected the taste of the average urban adult of different generations, but harlequinade would not change, and the price of its pedantry was death. Grimaldi had interested children by directing his efforts first and foremost to the entertainment of adults. Yet even Harry Payne, who revered the name of Grimaldi, could say, "I love the little ones, and I play to them for them, and their friendly praise, so unstintedly given, is ever my best reward." The laughter of children falls gratefully upon the ear, but no form of entertainment that would retain its popularity with grown up people can afford to make its primary appeal to children. Not even the children appreciate the condescension, and this can be seen in the difference between the way they laugh today at the pantomime proper, to reverse the application of Morley's words, and the deliberately childish entertainment that is called the children's comic harlequinade. The invasion by the music hall comedians was looked upon by many people as a descent of the barbarians. In 1881, a critic complained that their songs were of questionable character, and their patter was the silliest nonsense. The following year, another wrote in the theater, "We may say of present day pantomime that the trail of the music hall is over it all. I admit the extreme ability of the certain music hall comedians. I object, however, altogether to the intrusion of such artists into the domain of pantomime, and I say so because they, and others not so able, bring with them, so to speak, an atmosphere which it is to sad to see imported into the theater. They bring with them not only their songs, which, when offensive in their wording, are sometimes made doubly dangerous by their tunefulness, not only their dances, which are usually vulgar when they are not inane, but their style and manner and gags, which are generally the most deplorable of all. The objection to music hall artists on the stage is not only that they take the bread out of the mouths of the profession, which is a minor consideration for the public, but that they have the effects of familiarizing general audiences, and children especially, with a style and a kind of singing, dancing, and business, which, however it may be relished by a certain class of the population, ought steadily to be confined to its original habitat. To discuss the details of the music hall songs, patter, and general vulgarity is unnecessary here. There will be examples in the appropriate section. Suffice it for the moment that the writer's objection was that they were being presented in pantomime to non music hall audiences, and children especially. The same critics said that the songs would not be tolerated by paterfamilias in his drawing room. Yet, when he takes his children to the pantomime, they are the most prominent portion of the entertainment. Hot Codlings was not sung by a music hall comedian, but would it have been tolerated in the drawing room? And in any case, what right had the numerous critics of this type to insist that pantomime ought to be subdued to the stiff and polite atmosphere of an anti Macassard drawing room? Anti-macassard. I don't know that word. The gallery boys knew nothing about drawing rooms, incidents, and language which strike a refined, or as Mr. St. John Irvine loves to put it, refeigned person as being vulgar, and vulgarity does not mean obscenity, are often welcomed by a popular audience as a true comment upon life or a realistic picture of it. The critics who denounced the music hall comedian were the very people who tried to hound Ibsen out of the theater as a low fellow. The criticisms passed on the presence of the music hall comedians happily unavailing, but a great deal of good was done by the onslaughts upon the predominating scenery. Towards the end of the century, a compromise was reached, and the modern form of pantomime was introduced. It is better in shape than any of its predecessors, and the contents, thanks to the comedians, dancers, singers, scenic artists, dress designers, and other unacademic entertainers, are fit fare for young and old. And that concludes that chapter. The next chapter is the halls. And how long is that chapter? I'm not going to read it now, obviously. Not going to read it now, bruv. The halls is a 40-page epic. And we'll almost close out the book. 40 pages. It's going to be a long read. Maybe tomorrow, maybe not. I wonder how much it costs to print a book with all glossy pages. Can't be cheap. Damn, that's a long chapter. That is a fat chapter. The hell's that? Hand. The hell does that mean? How fat that chapter is. I don't want to read it, bruv. I won't read it. Alright, that's all. Any final words? You got any final words, bruv? Oh man. Ugh. Is thick. That's your final words. Is thick. We're in book room number 2, bruv. And there's book room number 1 there. And I'm going to bed number 1 shortly. Hello, bruvs. Famous final words. Speak them now. Speak them now, bruv. Too many books, not enough time. You ain't kidding. And I just gave myself some hearts. 100%. Things. Happy face. Hearts. Right. There's no way I can read all these books. Not even come close. Too many books. And trinkets. Jaws. There's a pyramid. Dog. No, that ain't the dog treat one. I wonder where the hell my dog treat jar is. From the 1940s. That even got a book rack. All right. Do you have a book about slang? I'm pretty sure you just saw slang right there. It's a whole crate of slang. Whole milk crate of slang. Cat's pajamas. A fabulous fictionary of familiar phrases. Hello. The Little Prince. I need to sell that book. It's worth like $100 or more. The Little Prince. Oh man. Alright, Robs. I gotta go. Tired. I'm tired. I read my brain out.